my God. Oh my God. It's amazing. And everybody, welcome to the Gamification Revolution. I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman. You're here with me today, live from beautiful Paris, France. What better place to talk about gamification and engagement? And I'm joined today on the show by Nicole Lazzaro, who's with us from Oakland,
Hi,
California. Hi,
Gabe. Nice
Nicole.
to be here.
Woohoo! So everybody, if this is your first time joining us live on Gamification Revolution, you're in for a treat. Before you can join the conversation, you'll need to click one of these buttons that's somewhere near you to log in, authenticate with Twitter or Facebook, and then you can actually submit a question to be answered by Nicole or myself. And if you have a video camera, you can even come on live. You'll see more buttons appear as you log in with submit a question, come on camera. We'd love to have you. For those of you watching or joining us later via the podcast or video podcast. Thanks for being with us. Obviously, you can't ask questions of me here live, but you can follow myself on Twitter at gzacurm or Nicole Lazzaro at Nicole Lazzaro on Twitter, which will put her Twitter handle right on the screen. Okay, Nicole, let's talk about something. So you've been incredibly influential on so many people with your work on Four Keys to Fun, which we're going to talk about in 1 second. But first, you have a background in psychology. Tell me this. How important is it to have a fundamental grounding in human psychology to be able to design things in an engaging
Well,
way?
I think that it's important to, you don't need to necessarily have a formal training in psychology, but you absolutely need to understand players. You need to understand that who you're designing for are people. So understanding the basic fundamentals, the psychological fundamentals, is really important for motivating, your designs.
So, but how is it possible to understand those fundamentals without getting some
Right.
formal training? Because
Mhm.
this kind of tension comes up
Sure.
often, right? And I think that people need to be curious about
Mhm.
human psychology. At minimum, you need to be consuming a lot of current content. Do you think that's true? What do people really in practice need to
Well, I
do to be
think
able to do
what
this?
the most important thing to do is in your designing system for players, your designing system for people. And so the most important thing anyone can do is to develop a curiosity for how people think and how people behave. I have a background from Stanford in cognitive psychology, which is exactly that. How do people think, learn and remember? And the best thing that you can do if you don't have formal training is watch people play games, watch people play your website, watch people play what you create, and watch people do what they do on a daily basis. So you can look at look at people in behaving in these systems, working, whether they're working or whether they're visiting a website, and and do that. Uh, but yeah.
So, well, but everybody needs like systems and structures, right? And I think, one of the things that people most know you for is the development of this concept of four keys to fun, which is a system or
Right.
structured way of
Sure.
thinking about fun for people. So, can you describe? I know you do this a
Sure.
million times. I never get tired of hearing it. Can you describe the four keys to fun for everybody, and then we'll talk a little bit
Okay,
more about
absolutely.
it.
Yeah, so what it is what we did is we looked at what I did is I looked at people at play, watched them play at home, school, and work, young and old, male and female, and I noticed that there was something similar about. I really was curious about how people engage with games, what made games engaging. So I measured people's faces using Paul Ekman's facial action coding. I measured 7 emotions on the face, other emotions on the body. And I classified the different moments of play, the things that people enjoyed most out of games, by the emotions that they were feeling. And so by doing this, we had different clusters. So I had 4 different groups of emotions that were similar around these favorite activities and games. And so back from each activity, I then backed it up into the types of choices that players made. And then I created what we call the 4 keys to fun. So what I did is I backtracked from, again, watching people play, which I think that's why that's so important. Watching people play, identified what were 4 types of fun that they were having by the emotions that they were feeling. And then I then looked at, well, what were the games doing? Everything from Bejeweled to Call of Duty to make people feel that way. And so then what we did was we extracted that out into a formal system or a tool for thought, a way of thinking about games, a way of thinking about designing engagement. because you can't design engagement directly, but you can design or the emotions directly, but you can design these engaging systems that create the emotions that suck, that really suck players in. So instead of getting a background in general psychology, for example, what you can do if you're trying to practice is look at these tools and models that take the psychological principles and the stuff that you might take years to learn, and distill it into something, an actual tool set, an actual kind of a reference library that you can use for thinking about designing your system.
Rubric.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, a
A
rubric, a
rubric, yes,
framework.
framework, yeah.
And so this four keys, yeah. So what are the four
Yeah,
keys to
so what
fun
we
in
noticed
the
is
work
that
that you did?
people's favorite games had four things in common. Games really do four things for players. They provide challenge, pretty obvious. They provide novelty, they provide friendship, and they provide meaning. And we noticed that that gamers tended to go through these four different types of fun in a single play session. And we call them this way. Sort of there's this curiosity. It's the hook that pulls you in. It's curiosity, wonder, surprise through exploration, role play, and fantasy. And we call that easy fun because it's really not hard. It's like dribbling a basketball. You can do it all day. It's sort of the bubble
Right.
wrap. I like to think of it as the bubble wrap of game design. It's just fun just because. And then after you've done that for a little while, it's like, what we did is when we watched people actually play games, they were doing all these crazy things. They were driving the racetrack backwards. They were throwing all their sims into the pool and pulling out the ladders to see what happened. They did they were, using a freeway exit ramp to launch their car, over a building. Nothing that had to do with the actual game. All of this is stuff is easy fun. But then games have to come in a little bit to do a little bit more than just provide those kind of activities. They need a goal. People need a goal. They need challenge. They need something to accomplish. And so that's where we have goals, challenges, obstacles, strategies that create a lot of frustration in the player, which then leads to the feeling of the epic win. Yes, I just got the boss monster. And we call that emotion fiero. And with fiero, it's a really wonderful emotion for the second key, and it's but you have to feel frustrated first. In fact, you have to feel so frustrated that you're almost ready to throw the controller through the window. If you win at that time, that's when the arms go up and they punch the sky. That's the frustration that leads to fiero. You can't push a button and win is what I like to think of it. And I call this key hard fun. So we've got two types of fun now. We've got easy fun, which is the hook that pulls you in, curiosity, novelty, wonder, surprise. Then we have hard fun, which is the challenge and strategy. Really, frustrating the player in order to get them into an emotional state, and then you let them win, and then they feel wonderful because it's fun in that way. But then when we were watching players play, again, we did a lot of field research. We watched people playing on all the platforms. We followed them home, and we noticed that the most emotionally intense, most engaging moments in games actually happened when they were playing with their friends. So that's where the third key comes in. So it's
Mm.
social interaction. It's the way that people interact. It was amusement, Amici, Schadenfreude, all of these, a lot of trash talking, communication, cooperation, competition. The epic win feels better in the context of friends. All that hard fun, if it's in with people, surrounded with people fun, what we call people fun, even better. So that's people fun. That's the third key. And then lastly, what we saw is that people also enjoyed these moments after the win, which is what we call serious fun. And it was about meaning. And many people feel that games are a waste of time. Maybe not many in this particular audience, but many people do. And what was really remarkable to us is that what we saw is that people did things. They played a brain training game to get smarter. They played an action game to blow off frustration. They played a dancing game to lose weight. They intentionally wanted to benefit from actually playing. So they were playing in a sense almost as if to change themselves and change the world. And so whether it was, lose weight or, or plant trees in Madagascar. And so we call this serious fun, which is intending to play in order to accomplish something. And that's where badges come in. That's one way. After you win, you earn a badge. But that's just really just scratching the surface of what happens, the mechanics that are available to us in the context of serious fun. So in the center, if you imagine with the four keys, there are the actions that you can take. So whether it's exploration and role play for some easy fun, curiosity, wonder, surprise, whether it's taking on a challenge or a goal for hard fun, whether it's the opportunity to compete or cooperate or ram your car into your friend's car for people fun. And then serious fun really just wraps it all up, and you've got repetition and rhythm, collection and completion mechanics that relax the player or create them, make them excited. All of those happen in serious fun. Mhm.
And so folks can actually go to your website, XEODesign.com, XEODesign, or
Yeah,
NicoleLazzaro.com,
Lazaro, yeah.
Lazzaro.com, to get
Mhm.
more info. So no, here's my question for you though, which is a silly question, Nicole. You've done all this, you spent all this time working on it, so you probably think of this as a silly question. Why is fun important at
Well,
all?
fun is extremely important because play is where we invent our future selves. So it is the preparatory activity for virtually all learning. All games teach. And while we think of adults as not being, the type of animal that plays in many Western societies anyway, it's not true globally, but in Western society, that we are actually losing, if you imagine, it's almost like cutting off an arm in terms of the way in which that we engage with what we are going to do. We play with ideas, for example, or we noodle around. We do things in practice before we actually, actually accomplish things. The other thing that play is really good for is, play is also really super important for creativity. And so being able to come up with that new ideas, you have to go into the what you would see in a game was called a magic circle. So you actually have to go into this play space to generate more ideas. Or if you do, you're going to be a lot more creative. The other thing that it tells us is that play in games is really it games are all simplified work. So by understanding games, by understanding, taking time to really understand what, how they work, we actually then can understand how humans engage in real life activities. So, for example, if you go, back in the day when you used to, actually milk cows before clicking, now we click on them. Inherent engagement was inherent in the task, and you could see if you were on target. You could watch the pail fill with milk. You could care and feed for the animals. At the end of the day, you could carry that milk back to the barn, and it felt heavy. You felt, oh, job well done. A lot of things got a
Right.
lot of this natural engagement got lost when work became virtual and mouse driven. So tools like the four keys to fun have
Sure.
identified systems that game designers have used and game developers have invented in order to put a lot of that engagement back into an activity that's entirely virtual. So we can use design patterns from games to make non-games more engaging. And that's whether it's the completion bar on LinkedIn, that you've got a quest that you've got to go, your group quest actually, you got to get recommendations in LinkedIn, to things like badges on a website, to social features that drive pretty much all of the stuff like drive Wikipedia. A lot of social interaction coming straight from games really drives a lot of these a lot of these systems.
Well, one of the things that strikes me about, your four keys to fun,
Yeah.
view of the world is that by defining it in that way, we also you're kind of challenging what people think of when they think of the word fun, because I think most people,
Mhm.
or play, because most people think of something that really isn't accretive. But when we listen to you describe it, when I listen to you talk about, for example,
Mhm.
milking a cow and carrying that pail of milk to the barn, I'm reminded right away that, things can be fun that maybe they're not analogous to play without purpose. They can be play with purpose. And I know that you've got a lot to say about that. I want to call out briefly that Michael Finney, a regular watcher of the show, talks about how awesome it is to be able to play safely in your
Mhm.
job, and what an interesting opportunity that creates, which is an awesome
Yeah.
comment, Michael. And we have this question from Dutch, which I think is an interesting question related to the four keys, which is, so what about the behaviors that are associated with transitioning between easy and
Yeah.
serious fun? And I think that Dutch is probably asking that from a designer standpoint. How do we get somebody to potentially go from easy fun to serious fun? And what are the things that maybe also we perceive or that are triggers that tell us that somebody wants to move from
Right,
easy
right.
to serious
Okay.
fun, in your
Well,
experience?
wonderful. I mean, I think that the most important thing, sort of what fundamentally, started me on this path to understand play and, become such an expert in it, is that there wasn't one type of fun. it was clear to us. I've been running XEODesign for the past 20 years. And we've worked with all the major publishers. We've improved over 100 million player experiences for games, anywhere from
Wow.
Sims to Myst to stuff coming out of EA and Ubisoft, Sega, all the major publishers. And what I wanted to do is like, how was play different? How was fun different? It wasn't just haha, we're having fun, we're laughing. There were also like really like intense emotions. There were some definitely different moments in games, very different types of fun. People wanted different types of fun at different types of day. People would experience different types of fun within that same play session. So I was very curious. So I don't know if we can bring up, if it's possible to bring up the four keys, but you can download it or bring it up on 4K2F, four keys to fun, so 4K2F.com, and you'll notice that
Mhm.
it's a nice circle, nice clover leaf, and the key there is that is basically that you've got the ability to you move from one to the next. You move one. So for to go from the question was from serious fun to hard fun. Is that right?
Or from easy fun
Right.
to
Yeah.
serious fun. Any as let's say
Yeah.
easy fun to serious
Well,
fun, which is
so
the
in a
best
sense,
approach.
like I think the most interesting one that to complete a loop is that if you only had hard fun and you won, so you got the challenge. There's a reason why the basketball hoop is really small and high over your head. It wouldn't be as fun if it was just right here and you could just put the ball in directly, right? You have to shoot it up. And
Sure.
so to shoot it up, then that's hard. That's difficult. When you accomplish it, great. So you won. But then at that point, then what a game does is they actually do other things, right? They'll assign you points for that basket, right? And you have a goal, you have a time constraint for getting certain number of points by the end of that time. And then other things in a virtual game, then there are fireworks and rainbows, then there are badges, then there are things that happen. You might work in a shooting game. You might work to clear that. Well, you might clear that labyrinth of a dungeon of a dragon in WoW, and then suddenly a new door opens up. And so you solve this puzzle, which is the hard fun. The door opens, and now what you have is you have a new area to explore, and that's all easy fun. And so the level of challenge goes up and up and up. You solve your puzzle, and then the challenge drops to the floor. You feel relief, and then but you also feel really empowered, and there's no challenge, so then you actually feel like even more challenge. So it is really a high. And so there's this so that's hard fun and easy fun. And then from hard fun to serious fun is you might change the world, because now you've unlocked this door. The water that's filling up the chamber that's going to drown the hero or something like that is slowing down. So you get this serious fun that goes back go back to it. And I think that the big
So
takeaway, which just following up on your question earlier, is that it really plays an important part in human psychology, because it's also so tied to emotions. So what we've done in games is we've evolved the ways of making choices, interaction design that creates intense emotional states. And that's very important, because if you go into the average workplace today, let's face it, if it were a zoo, the Humane Society would protest. Cubicles, if you think about it, cubicles are basically cages for people. And so what, and then so how if you think about it, they're so ill-equipped to provide the emotional structure that they need, the emotional tools that people need to do their work, or that would aid. There are all of these in games. We have all of these emotional power-ups, the different features in games. And so interaction design, the next generation of it, really is going to be, game design. So if you think about a photo editing tool, at the very
sure.
beginning of a photo editing tool, a process, whatever, is that you have at the very beginning, you want to be really creative. So you want those tools, those choices to create a lot of curiosity and wonder, so that you can blue sky and come up with a lot of crazy ideas. Later on, closer to the deadline, we're doing comps and cutouts, and you've got to measure really precisely and make the exact choice on that font.
Yes.
You need that same UI to create different emotions to help you with that task. And so we can actually take these cues from the game to go all the way through. And so if you start with our four keys to fun, you start with
So
easy fun, go to hard fun, serious fun, stuff like that.
and
Yeah.
progress around. So one question that's come up kind of in
Yeah.
chat in the discussion, Beth was talking about it with Michael
Uh,
here in the chat. They're talking about the issue of
sure.
failure and when things are maybe
Hmm.
too hard. So how do you
Well,
strike that
that's the
balance
whole
between
role.
something
Yeah.
that
Yeah, so the
Very
whole
fun.
role of one of the major roles of Easy Fun. Remember, Easy Fun is the bubble wrap of game design. If you're in Grand Theft Auto, you're going from point A to point B on a mission. You're really frustrated. You're not quite getting to, the next milestone. You can at any time, the game does these strange things. It offers you plate glass windows, right? And a car. Any car, you can steal any car you want. Why are there plate glass windows in Grand Theft Auto? It's because they're fun to, so it's the easy fun. It's like improv theater. I'm making you an offer, the game's offering something, and then I can use that car and, interact with it and see what happens. So the offering easy fun at the option at any time, then the player can sort of self-balance the game. If they're too frustrated and they're about ready to quit, then they can do the easy fun to get less frustrated, and then they go back refreshed to the main challenge. So they counterbalance each other. That's really important. Um, yeah,
How important, because this was also part
sure,
of the discussion, how important do you think failure is when we're talking about applying this in a gamified setting? So there's one thing when we're talking about in a
sure.
game setting, where we're just really talking about, let's say an abstract
Yeah.
entertainment product. But let's say that we're talking about using the four keys and failure in a
Right.
workplace setting, for example, or in a
Sure.
marketing setting. Do you think we need to build in explicit paths to failure so people can learn from failure, or is failure something that we want to treat just kind of incidentally when it happens? Like, should people really be succeeding all the
Right.
time
Well, I
or
think
not? I
that
guess is the question.
I think that's actually goes back to that's actually just a good leadership question. If you were to ask a leader or a manager, well, so your people, should we set them up so that they always succeed, or should we prevent them from possibly failing? What kind of culture does that create? What kind of accountability culture does that create? And how do your people learn if they aren't allowed to try tasks where they might fail? Now, the thing to take away from games is that they have lots of different mechanics, and we talk about that a little bit in the four keys of how do you create a system that where it's safe to fail or where it feels okay to fail. So I fail and I learn and I try again. And the fail and try again, there's lots of really great things the games do to make it really easy for you to dust yourself off and and go at it again, as opposed to feeling, oh my gosh, I'm going to go, I'm going to quit my job or kill myself or something. And the you've got the ability to go back. Like I was just looking in chat a little bit earlier. Someone was talking about how this might explain the terrible things that they do on to their Sims. And that if
Yes,
you've
the
got,
Sims,
in a
right?
sense, like if you have a game, what a game will do is it'll put you in a really creative space so that you can just try it. You can practice. Let's do a practice round. If I were to give you a nuclear power plant game, and we were actually your job was to, it was a training game. And if you weren't able to, what would the first thing be that you would want to try and do if I gave you a nuclear power plant game?
Well,
There
blow
we
the
go.
plant up for me. That's the first thing I want to do.
And I think just about everybody in chat, there'll be a few people who won't, but a lot of people, most people, 90% of people will want to blow the thing up. And that's the first thing to do. And if you don't allow them that flexibility, you don't allow them to fail and explore that failure state, and in games, make it fun, but allow them to explore the failure state, then they're going to be afraid of that failure state. They're going to not know what to happen when the failure state is about to happen. And so having the flexibility in these work systems so that you can fail is really important. And that's also just good UI design. That's why we have a cancel button. That's why we have undo, is to make failure easy. Now games can make undo
So
quite a bit more.
let's talk about something that's so let's talk about something for a second that's like a kind of real world failure mode. Obviously, something you feel very strongly about. It's a game that you designed called
Oh, sure,
Tilt
yeah.
World. And for those of you who don't know it, why don't you tell folks a little bit about Tilt World? I'll put a little image up on the screen here so folks
Oh,
can
great,
see it.
wonderful.
Just a static image. Tell them
Sure,
about the
yeah.
game.
So what we thought is we noticed that people, when we were talking to people about being green, people felt that it was hard. There wasn't a lot of feedback. Am I doing anything? Being green, is socially isolating. And so what if we could do, what could we do if we could do a game about being green that made it easy? And so what we did was I actually took the four keys. So the four keys is a practical model. And back when the first iPhone came out, I designed with Joe Hewitt this game, the first game on the iPhone to use the accelerometer, a game called Tilt. And so what we did is we applied that, and it's just a simple game where you match green one way and blue the other way. And when you did that, you earned points. And then we created a new game called Tilt World, which features Flip. I'm not sure if you can see it on your screen, but this little tadpole character that eats carbon out of the air, chomp, 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 and then plants seeds to restore Shady Glen. And then the points the players earn, we actually then use those points to plant trees on the island of Madagascar. And so we have the players have planted 10,000 trees so far. And I was actually there in October, visiting the planting site. So the idea was that we could, what would happen if we could, put something in people's hands, just a simple game, and people might play for 2 or 3 minutes. If enough of those people played, how much change in the world, in the real world, could happen.
So this is one of the interesting things,
Yeah,
Nicole. I've talked about this with you
sure.
before, but I think is very important. You set out with all your knowledge. You set out to try to make the world a better place and change it using the prism of games. And one of the things that you did, which I think is interesting, is you took the approach of saying, I'm going to make something that's really fun and engaging, fundamentally beautiful, fun, engaging, things that people are really interested in playing and engaging with, and then use their action to promote making the world a better
Mhm.
place in the background, versus building a kind of educational experience in which you kind of teach people through the game specifically that, oh my God, Madagascar is being
Mhm.
deforested and the whole
Right,
planet's going
right,
to
right, right,
hell
right.
and we're all going to burn up. Okay, why did you choose the way that you chose instead of
Yeah,
the
so
other
what
way
we wanted
around?
to do is we wanted Tilt World, first of all, to be, it had to be fun first, right? It had to be a real game. And then we wanted to have the education be very light, because there's plenty of games and plenty of, unfit, frankly, failed educational attempts to say, oh, well, this is the effect of deforestation. This is the effect of that. And if you do the hard sell, everybody who responds to hard sell, they've been getting that since the 60s. They're pretty much already recycling or doing what it is that they do. The people that really want to, we want to empower the people that are a little bit more on the fence. And so we thought of much more focused on story and focused on something that was fun was a better approach. And that's also backed up by the neuropsychology too, because people in a positive brain state are, in general, 50% more productive than they are in a fear state. And so we wanted to look at putting people in a positive state and seeing if that could, and seeing for those folks, putting them into a more, kind of creative role and a reflective role. Plus, the people that we wanted to reach the most were kids. So kids have eco-minded parents. Kids will play games anyway, so why not create a game that reflected the value of the parents? And so that gave them the opportunity to do that. So it's very light. It's very light on the education or the the kind of fear stuff. But what is interesting is that in doing the game, and we'll be coming up with more of this as well, is we found a number of really interesting, almost game-like systems in ecology and reforestation. So, for example, forests have this wonderful role. Not only do they produce oxygen, and they also cool the earth by creating cloud cover, which I thought was interesting. The transpiration of trees actually creates micro droplets that form low-lying clouds, which help cool the earth. There's some very interesting, eco cycles that we look forward to exploring in some of our future games.
So one question that's come up, it's fascinating, and Tilt World is great, and we put the URL up before, and of course
Yeah.
folks can find it in the App Store under Tilt World. But one question here from P, who's I guess a first-time watcher of the show, or
Yeah.
thanks for uncloaking. So there, P's looking to actually use points that are generated in a crowd-funded setting or crowdsourced setting, and actually turn those into real-world initiatives, kind of like what you were
Absolutely. Yeah.
doing, I think, with
Mhm.
Tilt World, action to the real world. What's some advice that you would give people looking to turn virtual action into real world results in terms of being able to maybe, let's say, generate the maximum amount of attention, get the maximum engagement, also
Mhm.
fund
Oh,
projects
cool,
like that?
wonderful, yeah. Well, one of the reasons for us to make Tilt World, which we self-financed, was to inspire other game designers to think about games in another way. Really, it was to open up the box and say, look, we can connect games into the real world and do real accomplishments. You can see, this progress we're making from space. Yeah, there's with Tilt World. So I think the thing is to the I've got another framework called GAME, where you have goals, actions, motivations, and emotions, and you can use this framework. It's up on my it's up on some of my slides on SlideShare. The SlideShare is slideshare.net. Nicole Lazzaro, my name. You can pull down some of those decks. And the most important thing I think for succeeding in this space, we sort of call it play sourcing, is to really connect players' actions to mirror what they're doing in the real world, or what that action would be in the real world. So you could have people play basketball, and the points you earn in basketball, then once we reach our goal, hey, then we're going to go plant trees. But the learning, and so that's fine. There's no reason why not to do that. But if you it's much better to change people's, because we also want to change the player, not just the world. We want to change the player, and to change the player to change the world. You want that action to be really closely tied to what the player is actually doing. So, for example, in Tilt World, just to use that as an example, that's why Flip, who's our little tadpole character, is eating carbon out of the air and gathering seeds and planting them, because that mirrors what the real world action is going to be. And so we made a game mechanic around the activity that the game was going to produce. So I think that's really a really important part.
Yeah, and I think all of it is important. It's so amazing. And folks can, of course, follow you again at Nicole Lazzaro on Twitter, which we put up on screen, XEODesign.com. For those of you who are regular followers of this show or followers of gamification.co, you may have noticed that on the web, we've actually launched a new application. Of course, your stuff is in there as well, Nicole. It's called EngageDB, and we're trying to actually put our arms around every example, the use of gamification and engagement science that's occurred across a wide range of subject matters and areas. So every field, education, finance, government, changing the world, design patterns, and you can now actually check it out. We've launched it with a few hundred records built by some of our great members of our team, including our erstwhile summer intern, Aiden, who hopefully is recovering well from his appendix surgery right now. But you can check it out at gamification.co and look under the engagedb/wiki link. You can click on that and you can see all these great examples. And if you've got other examples of gamification that you'd like included, you can follow that link and submit something for it. In the meantime, I want to thank you,
You're
Nicole, for
welcome.
joining us. Thanks so much for
Mhm.
being here
Oh, you're
today.
welcome. Welcome. And thank you.
Great to
And if
have
there
you.
are any one thing that we didn't touch on, but if you wanted to visit my blog, NicoleLazzaro.com, I have some examples of how games can actually deliver public service. So we've been doing some work with the White House and IBM on that. So it's another place to check some things out.
Fantastic. So we have the NicoleLazzaro.com link up there. And for those of you who aren't already doing so, you can follow me at @gzakerm. We'll be back next week again with another edition of the Gamification Revolution, where our guest will be Carl Kapp, who's one of the leading experts in the use of gamification in the workplace. And until we see you next week here, everybody, I hope that you have a lovely week. Keep having fun. Thanks again for being
All
with us,
right. Thank
Nicole.
you.
Take
Thank
care.
you.